Welcome to episode 22 of Raiders of the Lost Art. My name is Finbar, and this is 8,000 miles to TapTown, the city of Los Angeles, the entertainment capital of the world, the cultural mecca, a place where dreams are made and dreams are broken. LA is a place that has borne many different music styles, from the surf rock of the 60s to the folk music of Laurel Canyon in the 70s to the Sunset Strip in the 80s with rock and metal, and to then becoming the rave capital of America in 2010. But there is, however, one musical genre that started in the mid-70s that went largely unnoticed in the Los Angeles scene. A genre that really redefined what was possible with music. A genre built on a new instrument and a new playing style. An instrument called the Chapman Stick and a playing style called freehands. This technique fused many different instruments in one string fingerboard, from guitar, bass, keyboards, and percussion. The instrument and playing style was invented by Emmett Chapman, a Los Angeles-based musician and inventor. As time evolved, so did the genre and so did the music. New instruments came to the fore, evolutions of the original Chapman Stick, like the Warr Guitar, new playing styles, and then bands like King Crimson and Kittyhawk took this music to the masses. As a young guitarist in Australia, I dreamed of visiting TapTown, Los Angeles, and being part of this cultural phenomenon. And to be totally honest, I was so lucky I got there. In this series, we uncover the story of TapTown, the inventors, the players, the history, and the music. So with that, I invite you to come with us on this journey as we go in to bring into life the birth of this scene as it continues to grow today. So, hit it. Welcome, guys. It's so great to have you on the show. Paul, Jim, Randy, amazing. I've got you all on the same call at the same time. So thanks so much for joining the episode.
Our pleasure.
You're welcome. Yeah. So, Paul, look, I might just throw to you, buddy. First off, how did you and Randy meet, and Jim? Where did all this start for you?
Well,
That's
I guess it's a long story. I could start. I was playing in a little club in West Los Angeles, playing guitar, singer-songwriter, I guess doing my own songs, I believe, yeah. And Emmett happened to follow me. I had no idea about the stick or Emmett or anything. Of course, it was before he started selling the stick, right? It was 1974. So he came on, and I was just blown away. He did a Beatles tune and this, that, and the other. And at the time, it was revolutionary, really. I mean, could you imagine never seeing something like that? Never hearing something like that? So I was just transfixed. I looked him up, and I think I got the 44th instrument or something like that he ever made. And so I got involved with Emmett heavily, was really inspired. I played bass and guitar and sang, and I'm ambidextrous pretty much. So playing the stick to me was a natural. So many guitarists I've met, famous guitarists, can never play the stick. They buy the stick, they put it in or a Touchstyle instrument and put it in the closet. They could never figure out how to play it. To me, it was just like a duck jumping into water. Uh, so that's like my quick background. So I'm one thing led to another, and I'm building instruments for Emmett. You know, I'm finishing the stick. I'm down in the garage making sticks for him. You know, being a musician and working for him, making sticks and loving it. And this rock star comes over, this skinny
Oh,
guy
stop.
with with this black tight leather and everything. You know, waltzes in there. This is Randy Strom, you know, rock guitarist. Who were you with, Randy? What was the
I,
band?
I was recording and touring with the lead singer from the Guess Who Canada band, famous Canada, Burton Cummings.
Burton Cummings. And
And
so, you know, there he is, and somehow Emmett says, "Well, go, you know, go down with Paul, and he'll play you something or something like that." Didn't I play you something down there, Randy? I think I did. And
yeah,
we just hit it up. We just hit it off, you
Yeah.
know, and then that was the beginning of a beautiful relationship. I mean, honestly,
yeah.
Randy and I, there's not one other person. We went through Stick Enterprises together, Kittyhawk together, evolving to the Warr Guitar together. Mark Warr was my student for 2 years, and we shared ideas, and it helped evolve or begin the Warr Guitar. So, you know, Randy and I, you know, there's not another person in the world that has
Ah,
gone through the same thing I have, except Randy. So that's what I would say.
Wow, true pioneers right from the get-go, right from the birth of this whole. Not even a genre, really. It's a whole technique, right?
Yeah, it was, you know, and I want to just say right off how much indebted I think we all are to Emmett, because Randy and I still play his tuning. We love his tuning. You know, there's other tuning, of course, that Jim uses, but without Emmett, I don't know where we would be with this. I'm not sure. Maybe nowhere. Maybe we'd still be plinking on guitars. I don't know.
Well, it's a great
yeah,
story. What do you remember, Randy? How do you remember meeting Paul?
yeah. I met him over at Emmett Chapman's house in the very early days. I think it was 1976.
75, maybe 76. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when I was in Los Angeles in the studio with Burton Cummings and the band, and I had seen the stick in the Guitar Player magazine, and I started thinking about it because I'm also a keyboard player, and I'm doing both, you know. And then I thought, oh, it's keyboard reflex, which obviously, you know, and wow. So then, yeah, I called up Emmett Chapman and went over to the house on Yucca Trail. Yay!
Uh-huh. Yeah. Laurel
Yeah,
Canyon. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, that was really something. And so, yeah, you know, for years I just kind of toted it around and messed around with it. I didn't really play it on gigs until much later. But yeah, that's how it started. I don't know. I think we met Jim at a Kittyhawk show too. That so you know, yeah,
Is that
very
right,
No,
early.
I'll
Jim? I don't remember that.
no.
Is that
My
Isn't that right?
let me
Okay.
tell you about my relationship to these two guys. Okay,
Oh God, oh
uh,
no.
I I I I wanted to buy a stick, and I heard that often Stick Enterprises had used instruments for sale. And so I lived in Colorado at the time, and my girlfriend and I drove to Los Angeles. And from about an hour outside of downtown Los Angeles, I called Stick Enterprises and got Yuta on the phone and said, "Hey, do you have any used instruments?" And she said, "Well, we just happened to get one in today." come on up. And so I took, to me, it was like, that old cartoon Snuffy Smith, right? They all lived on the sides of mountains. Driving up that road to the house in Laurel Canyon, to me, was like the most dangerous thing I'd ever done. And I'd lived in Colorado for years. And so I arrived. Emmett was not there. Yuta very nicely let me in. And she said, "This is Paul. He's going to demonstrate the instrument for you."
Oh,
And so
Okay.
Paul put the instrument on me and said, "This is how it's tuned." And I looked up at him. I said, "I already know I want to buy it." And he said, "Oh, okay." And so they sold me the instrument. I think I still have the receipt somewhere. And I left not knowing who Paul was or what this whole thing was. I don't think I discovered that was actually Paul until after I met you two, which came, I mean, I went back to Colorado. I started playing the stick.
yeah,
I
yeah.
remember distinctly the first time I heard Elephant talk on the radio. I knew exactly what it was. And then I discovered Kittyhawk. And I very clearly remember a night when I was playing a gig in Gunnison, and the whole band. I had this wonderful band called Intuition, which you can see on my YouTube channel. Very talented pianist, all original, cool music with odd meters and Sanskrit lyrics and all that kind of stuff. And I distinctly remember a night where we all fell asleep listening to the Kittyhawk album in our cab and at our gig in Gunnison, Colorado, and we were just amazed. It was like, to us, it was like the dark side of the moon or something, and it was just beautiful. So fast forward to 1989 when I moved to Southern California, and somebody says, "You have to meet these two guys." Okay. So I finally get to meet Randy and Paul, and at that time they had their long scale sticks. I want to say it was at Paul's house. What was that area you used to live in south of Paramount Studios?
Hancock Park.
Yeah, and you guys were so nice to me, and you let me play them, but you had the aircraft control wire to hold the necks in the proper position because they didn't have truss rods. And every time I would reach for a low note, the wire would scrape the inside of my thumb. But it was through also you guys that I eventually met Mark Warr through these guys. And I think when we had Brian on, he told a story about how he also met Paul at Stick Enterprises before he knew who he was. And so these two characters are just central. This whole thing, as Paul mentioned, they were there for the inception of the stick. They were there for the inception of the Warr Guitar. They had the first signed band, maybe the only signed band to ever have two stick players as featured instrument. And Randy has his accomplishments. Paul has his. I mean, this is major league guys here that you really people don't know their history. And I'm so glad you're putting them on your show, Finbar.
Well, that's awfully nice, Jim. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I don't know. I seem to remember at least seeing you at one of the Kittyhawk gigs. I'm sure that maybe happened.
I can't say that I ever went to a live Kittyhawk show.
Really?
I did. After I moved out here, I went to see you play, Randy, with Chet McCracken at Catch 21.
Oh, maybe that's the gig I'm thinking of.
And you had that guy that had the electronic vibraphone. It was an amazing gig. And you had charts on the floor with all these odd meters, and you were just reading them like crazy. And you had your long scale stick. But that was after I met you and Paul. I think you invited me to that gig.
Okay, well, that must have been when my eyes still worked.
Yeah, well, they're coming back, Randy. They're coming back.
That was supposed to be funny.
That's when his eyes still work.
Yay, funny.
He's had some eye work. He's had some eye work.
My problem is my ears don't work anymore.
Oh, yeah.
I stood next to too many rock and roll drummers for too long.
Oh, man. Haven't we all? Haven't we all? I think we should talk about, when you talk about a long scale stick, that was an amazing story, just that alone.
In what way?
It started with Randy, I would have to say, and he basically thought, why can't we have longer bass? Why? See, we struggled with the stick bass. The stick bass had flat wound strings originally, and the first Kittyhawk album was all flat round string bass, and we wanted something like more real bass or Rickenbacker bass, maybe even, and that's round wound, right? So Randy, who was a good experimenter, he got some round strings, and he actually put it. Randy, you put it on a stick, but you put it higher up on the nut or the top of the instrument, right? You made a longer string.
Yeah, at the time the nut, you could screw it off. It was a separate metal piece, and so I took the nut off and I moved it like
right
up a couple of fret spaces, and then I put the bass string on, and I went, okay, well that sounds a lot better to me. That sounds
And I was intrinsically involved in that. We'd get together and spend hours on that stuff, and we both thought, this is where we got to go. This is, and we basically got together with Emmett and pleaded for him to build us a longer stick.
I would say he was very accommodating to the idea, and now, of course, he has a model that is a longer scale than what the original scale was. So
that's right. Yeah. Now the problem with that is the melody strings are always a challenge because they can be thin sounding, right? And that was something we were working with the stick, right? And at the time, and so the long stick. Now that solo I do with Kittyhawk, it's a solo I used to do in the Kittyhawk set, and I think in 1984. It's one of the better solos I think I've done, to be honest, and that was with the long scale stick, and the melody is not the thickest sounding melody strings you'll ever hear.
No, you can't expect guitar range tuning strings to go 38 inches, which we had. I mean, it was a miracle if you could get the high D to not break quite often.
Right.
Yeah,
so it was.
And what was the normal scale length?
I think it was
the normal scale length on a.
I think it was the same as like a Fender bass, like it was a 34.
I don't remember. It's been so long since I've played one.
Yeah,
I don't remember. I thought it was shorter than the Warr. When I started playing the Warr, I felt like there was more space between the low frets. So I think the stick might be shorter than 34.
I don't know for sure.
Do we have some children running around here? I don't know. Do you guys hear that? I don't know. Not here. It's not here.
No.
What are you hearing?
Can I ask you guys? As you started to delve in and explore, and you were tweaking things, and like, how did the Touchstyle instrument that Emmett at the early days, how did that actually change your playing? Because you've come from guitar and singer-songwriter and keyboards. How did it evolve your playing by changing how did this instrument turn you into a different type of musician, basically?
Well, speaking for myself, I just added it to playing 6-string guitar, my Les Paul and my Rhodes. At the time it was the Rhodes and the Les Paul. So then I just added it, and like for me, like Paul said, it was so easy. It came very natural feeling to me. So I think it's and then plus, as time goes on, just in the last 7 years, I played just all solo gigs by myself with the Warr Guitar. It's like real easy to do the mellow solo dinner set,
I've always loved, to be honest, the bass and fifths, melody and fourths
Yep.
tuning, because with the bass and fifths you can play chordally with your left hand, right? So
Well,
I would,
you can do it when. Yeah. Go
I would,
ahead,
I
Paul. I'm
would,
sorry.
I would, I would start like a groove or a chordal groove, even on my left hand, and then start playing against it on my right. I would do like patterns that really sounded nice to me. I would realize that, oh my God, I can make chords between my two hands. I can play rhythmically between the hands and get a finger picking effect. I could play with two hands on the bass because it's in fifths, and I could go like that. And the chords between the bass and the melody, like you could do bar stuff and between the fifths and the fourths. I don't know. I was just in heaven. I just jumped in the water, and the water was warm, and uh, it was just, for me, it was just, I just started playing and playing and playing and playing and loving it, and then running into a new thing. The way I write music is I run into stuff and then start writing around it, and I could just run into so much stuff with the Touchstyle instrument. And again, this was Emmett's concept of his tuning, which really worked for me.
I think there's something I'd like to reflect on, just because I'm new to the instrument, but I've been playing pretty much like you guys all my life. I find today's times, it's we've got all this YouTube and we've got all this stuff that, even when I was learning guitar, there was none of that stuff around. You'd be rewinding VHSs and listening to things and trying to get constant. There wasn't the availability of all this information, which is also amazing. But I find that, I did a previous episode with a friend of mine from a band called Hunters and Collectors, Australian band, and he had this saying, don't put experience before adventure. And I found that when you don't know what you're doing, that's what I love about Touchstyle, is like, obviously I'm taking lessons and stuff of Jim and Randy and things like that, but the ability to sit in a space and not know what to do and just let your ears start to evolve and start to figure out stuff without someone telling you this is exactly what you can do. I find this instrument has such a big range and such sort of capability that I think what you're talking about is what excites me as well, Paul, is this, this infinite pool of with the guitar, you can create a couple of sounds and stuff like that. But with a Touchstyle instrument, it's just so much more full range, and the ability to interplay between hands and do things that I've never been able to do on guitar is what really excites me. And I think that there's this ability to be curious and to be adventurous and to not have to know everything and not to have everyone show you everything. And that's fine too, having this guidance, but to be able to go beyond that, I find these instruments can just take you on such an infinite journey of adventure. Just what do you guys think about that?
That's right. That's absolutely right. I mean, like I always say, it's like a slash chord counterpoint slide rule. You got all this varying, I don't know, just for me, the slash chords, this chord on top of that chord. I learned that from Paul and Daniel too, is like, oh, you're going to play this one, I'm going to play the same thing up a fifth, boom, it's a big chord, The instrument does that by itself too, So
Jim, what
and
about you, buddy?
actually,
in terms of where, like, I know we've talked a lot about the Warr Guitar, but from a playing perspective and your imagination and stuff, when you go back to that first stick that you had, what was it like, that adventure of just not knowing and just exploring?
well, I was a little bit nuts and bolts because the first thing I did was, play 12-bar blues forms and blues scales, so it was a little not quite interesting, except for the fact that you could do it quite easily, But then more and more, I would find, like you say, it's the discovery kind of thing where you discover types of chords that you wouldn't normally discover. Even I wouldn't discover them on the keyboard the same way. And that would be like the Kittyhawk song "Bells of Tolleson." That whole song is nothing but slash chords, 4-note slash chords in both hands, big, huge chords, as big as I could make them. And especially, with Paul and I, we even had bass lines that were in harmony and stuff. It was really quite satisfying, I must say. Made me happy.
Jim, what about you, bud?
The thing that excited me about the stick originally was having two sounds at the same time, that I could use two amplifiers and have a bass sound that was completely different from the guitar sound. And I would say the second thing that affected me was the force, all force on the guitar side. It made patterns for single note stuff so repetitive that finally, after struggling with the guitar for a decade, it all made sense as far as soloing went. Where now, on the guitar, I don't know if either of you guys studied the George Van Epps books about 3-note chords on the neck of the guitar. When you hit the second and third string, because of that different interval, all the shapes change. Well, when everything's in fourths, it becomes such a beautiful mosaic. And I think this is what attracted me to my tuning with the fourths on the bass side, because now everything just repeats all over the entire neck. I can double any note at any time. And but again, the first thing that really excited me was that I could have a bass sound and a guitar sound that were different. I lived in Denver at the time. I had read the same article that Randy referred to from Guitar Player, and a friend said, Emmett Chapman is playing his instrument tonight at so-and-so's music store. Let's go. And I said, I read that article. I don't really care about it. He's like, no, we got to go. You have to go. And it did. It changed my life. I saw Emmett play, and I realized other things that I felt he wasn't doing that I would like to do with it. And then I think just a few weeks later, he came to the University at Colorado at Denver, where I was studying with Dr. Bill Fowler, and played a gig there, which I actually still have a cassette recording of somewhere.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the big thing for me was that, and I was immediately playing, like I said, in a band that did odd meters and Sanskrit lyrics, and the piano player in that band was just brilliant. I mean, absolutely brilliant. At 25 years old, his technique and his talent were complete, and I was very fortunate that he would patiently show me his tunes, and I had to learn them on this bizarre instrument with this bizarre tuning. That's one reason I put one of his songs on my last album, was because I wanted to play it in my tuning, and it was just so much easier.
So, guys, can you give me some insight to, obviously, at the early days of the stick, when you guys were there, especially Paul, when you were there building them and working with Emmett, and then Randy coming in and changing things, and then Jim playing around with different tunings and all of this sort of stuff going on as this metamorphosis of ideas and creativity. At what point did this sort of evolve into the Warr Guitar? Because obviously the stick is one thing, and then the Warr Guitar came onto the scene. And look, as someone I started with a stick, learning a stick, and then quickly got into the Warr Guitar. And for me, the Warr Guitar felt much more at home. But for you guys, how did this evolve? Where did this come from? What was the problem it was trying to solve in the early days? And then how did it evolve from that?
Well, I
Go,
can
Paul,
say,
go.
I could say, as I said, Mark was a stick player when he started, right? And he was one of my students, and he'd come to my house. I think he was with me for a couple of years, and we'd go through all these assignments and everything, and just kind of as he went, he started getting these ideas, and I had ideas like that too. Like, hey, what if the strings fanned out at the bottom so you could pick it like you can a guitar? what if it had a body, so it had maybe it would have a little different sound, you know? What if the strings were a little further apart? You know, just all these ideas. And we just kept knocking around these ideas. And then, as I think Randy reminded me, Mark made a stick himself, and it was a long scale stick. Randy, was that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a
Yeah.
maple
He
long
made it,
scaled with the long.
and
Yeah.
of course, the first instrument he builds is very nice. The guy is just a great guitar maker, right? So, a great string instrument maker, let's say. So that was the beginning of it. Was incubation with me, with our lessons, and then he just kept going. And then, you know, and Randy was involved, and then Jim got heavily involved. Um, and it was just to me, it was a beautiful thing, to be honest. You know, I'm quite proud of Mark Warr.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I may, you know, I had been the idea of changing the strap locks so that it would hang vertically, and we we had an old Fender bass and we kept drilling holes in it and try it until it balanced. Said, okay, that's what we'll do. And then he said, I'm going to build you an instrument. And then I was really busy with my TV and film scoring stuff. And 2 years went by, and all of a sudden he called me up and says, your instrument's done. I'm like, holy smokes. It was beautiful.
Mm.
And yeah, that was my first Warr guitar. So
When was that, Randy? 91?
92, 92.
92.
Yep.
I got an instrument at 92 also and just loved it. Fell in love with
That's
it.
right. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. So
Jim, when was your first one, bud?
My first Warr was 96, but my attempts to modify the stick started long before that. Uh,
what now? Why is Paul laughing at that? Why are you laughing at that, Paul?
Because Jim, I think Jim is quite the creative dude here. You know?
No, I know. No, you're laughing because we all went through this phase.
Yeah, we all were
yeah,
experimenting.
I think that's true. I think that's true. And it started with a luthier in Denver, Colorado by the name of Harry Fleischman, who's fairly well known. You have to understand the first stick that Paul sold me was number 194. And it was a beautiful instrument. The pickup casing was also wood, and the belt hook was also wood. None of it was metal or the later materials. And I think because the pickup casing was wood, it had a nicer, different sound to it. It was only 10 strings. And the thing that offended me the most, if I dare use that word, was that instead of an adjustable bridge, it had set screws driven into the body at what had been determined to be the exact point for proper intonation if you used a particular gauge of strings. And if you used what kind of strings, Paul?
Oh,
Flat
Emmetts
wound.
strings. Huh?
Yeah,
Emmetts
flat wounds,
strings.
right?
Well,
And
you
like
mean
you,
for the bass, yeah.
yeah, like you, I just did not like flat wound strings. And so, I'm sorry this is turning into such a long story. I knew Harry Fleischman had modified an instrument for another stick player, and I took my instrument to him, and he put an adjustable bridge on it, and he deepened the pickup pocket so that we could use better magnets and make better pickups. And another gentleman by the name of John Starrett, who later developed the what's that? I forget what it's called now. It was a flat tapping instrument that was like a big piece of wood, and all the strings were maybe a whole step apart, but it had frets. And Stevie Wonder is playing one now. I forget what it's called.
Oh, it's a harpeggi.
A harpeggi. Don't you have one, Randy?
I want one. I just am. Yeah. I would like to get
I've
one.
backed you into a corner here. We'll forget about that. So anyway,
no, I do want one. That's right.
There were these brilliant people in Denver who thankfully agreed with me and took on my problems. So when I got to California, I had this modified instrument, and of course, it was hard for me to get strings. But by that time, I was pretty good at sourcing my own. And
Yes, yes.
I had gotten a little press when I first got to LA, and I had a wonderful student named Mike Shields, who is now a very close friend, very dear friend. And at that time, he and I were like, what are we going to do? Let's build our own instrument. I was like, yeah, that's attractive, but I sure don't know that much about it. And Paul and Randy had already introduced me to Mark. I had given him a lesson or two. After that was one of the things on our first meeting. Paul said, "Oh, I've got a student that would like to take a lesson from you," because I did some walking bass stuff, which I think Paul liked a little bit. And Mark was not as impressed with me as Paul was.
Oh.
And
That must have
at
changed.
some point, this is kind of scandalous, but at some point, I played my last and only stick show, right? When they used to do the stick shows. And I
Oh,
performed. And after my performance, Mark Warr came sneaking around and said, "I've built an instrument and I want you to play it." And I said, "Let's see it." And so my student and my girlfriend and I went down, and we had all been talking about building instruments. And after we saw them, we were like, this guy did it right. We don't have to build it now. We just have to come up with the money. This guy. And there was a lot of talk at that time about how all the sound of tap guitars were in the pickups themselves, and that the wood and the body had nothing to do with it. And Mark specifically had 3 different instruments set up with different woods so that we could hear the difference. And we were just stunned. The 3 of us were absolutely stunned at how right Mark had got it. And I agree with Paul. I mean, I remember after I knew Mark better, I was brewing beer and he decided to brew beer. And his first batch was excellent. And then he's one of those people that gets fascinated with something and absorbs it completely, and then goes on to the next thing and loses interest in it completely.
Hey, if I may, that homemade beer of you guys was fantastic beer.
Yeah. You mean Mark's?
Yours also.
Oh, well, and I remember Mark invited me to dinner at his house, and he had made his own root beer, which was also excellent.
Right.
I think he served like salmon. That's what I mean. He would cook these incredible meals, and he would just get fascinated with something, and he would learn everything about it like almost instantly. And then later it was like, you would find it crumbled up in a ball in the corner. He was done with it.
Well,
he's a
brilliant
he's a pretty
guy.
brilliant dude. Pretty brilliant dude.
Yeah,
Man.
very smart.
He's very low key.
He and Emmett both are very,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
Emmett's brilliant, and without Emmett, we wouldn't be where we are. So, you
I
got
know,
to
and
give
sometimes I'm not so happy about that.
Oh gosh. Oh
him. Oh,
gosh.
you want to be
Okay,
somewhere else?
I might have been an
no.
oceanographer.
Oh, well,
God.
then you might have made money. Great.
Yeah.
Oh, that old thing.
I remember one time here in Vancouver, I'd gotten into competitive table tennis, and I was playing, and there was this grunge rock band rehearsal studio across the street. So I was parked over there, and I went over there. I was about to get in my car, and this whole band comes out, and the drummer says to the guitar player, "Damn it, I wish it was not this 1970s." And the guitar player says, "Why?" And he says, "Because you could make money." And I looked at the guy, and I said, "I was that guy. I was that guy." So.
Well, guys, I know all of you, including myself, we've scored films and done compositions, and I'd just love to touch on some of that just for the listeners, like in terms of what you've done with your film composing, and maybe talking selfishly now from myself in the little time I've been doing Touchstyle, I believe that it's amplified my musicianship more than probably the last 10 years of the stuff I've done, albeit that I haven't been really, trying to learn, but through a roundabout way of just getting into Touchstyle, it's helped me so much with the evolution of my musicianship. I'd just like to touch on that for each one of you guys. So, Paul, can you maybe start and just talk about, what you've done with some of your film work and if that has actually, if the Touchstyle playing has influenced in your writing and composing?
Well, that's a really good question, Finbar. Of course, Randy dragged me into that too. Or no, I dragged Randy into the stick thing. Anyway, Randy was working with a great friend of ours, William Olvis, who was the composer of Medicine Woman, which was a hit on CBS. And so he had his own house studio, big time, wrote the theme, was making oodles of money. And we were just getting into samplers, and I had Performer, I guess, on a little Mac, the first Mac. And so I remember Randy brought William down to see my sequencer was Performer sequencer, and that's how I met William, and it just kind of evolved from there, where I ended up doing some of the notation work, printing charts, helping out with different aspects of it. Randy was more involved day to day with William than I was, but we became fast friends. He was an unbelievably talented dude. And so, Kittyhawk went for 8 years. And I think that's a little longer than the Beatles, maybe 7. The Beatles went 7. I mean, it's a long time for a band. I mean, bands don't stay together very long because it's effing hard. It's hard to keep everybody's schedules together, where everybody, Michael and Richard, Michael especially, was like Mr. Studio drummer, so to keep everybody on track and be able to go on tour and do all that stuff, and that we sell enough albums so that we keep doing it, like our first albums was supposed to sell 300,000 albums. It sold 50,000 albums, Well, that changed everything with the EMI America. Anyway, so we were going through all those dynamics with Kittyhawk, and maybe another time we could talk with Daniel about that, Finbar, because it's a whole story in itself, right? But anyway, so we got, when you get to the third album and then you lose your album deal, and then you're getting a smaller album deal, and then you change managers, and all these things happen, you start to realize there's like this very faint writing on the wall, but over time it gets more and more clear, So I saw the writing on the wall, and it said, Kittyhawk's not going to last forever, dude, So I did 2 things. I got into composition, film scoring, and computer programming. I did those 2 things, and those both worked for me. I studied with Spud Murphy, who's like the most incredible composer teacher on earth. Funny as hell. It was worth $100 an hour just to sit and listen to his stories, But anyway, he created a whole thing with music that nobody ever thought of. 10 years of I worked with him for 10 years, So working with, he lived 5 minutes from me. I'm the lucky F. I've always been lucky. So I was working with him. I was getting better. I was getting better as a composer. I always wrote music my whole life. So I thought, well, there's no other way to make music. Let's friggin' write for film. Let's do that. So I jumped into it and did some orchestration, did some composing, worked with Randy, worked with William. Probably scored about 10 films, either myself or with one other person, and then I loved it, but the film music is brutal. Film music business is brutal. I mean, it's brutal. It's inhuman. It's very difficult. What Danny Elfman said, if you work as a full-time film composer, you have the worst job on earth. Danny Elfman said that. So,
and why is that?
Because there's no composer union. There's nobody that says, no, you can't make him work. like that. You can't do that. No, you can't
Well,
decide that you
well,
need 5 more. Go ahead, Randy.
yeah, the television is worse than film because film they always can push the release date back, but television you're going to air on Saturday night no matter what. You better have your entire show mixed, sent to Dove Stage by Friday morning. We lost 2 nights sleep per episode of these real popular shows. So
Yeah, I mean, I love it.
it is brutal. It is brutal. But on the other hand, I
I
must
love it.
say that I never learned so much about orchestration on the job. Never learned so much about. That was the most interesting thing for me is how do you orchestrate and what are the ranges of the instruments and what's the transpositions and what's the so all that kind of thing was very helpful still to this day to know this stuff.
And could I
Anyways,
ask a couple of questions? Or I actually have a
sure.
comment and a question. My comment is I remember Paul telling me that when you're scoring a film, you're the last thing in line, and everybody
That's right.
before you has gone over their time so that you have to do it in less time than you were originally allotted to do the scoring. That's what I remember
Right.
you telling me your frustration with it was. But
Yes.
the other thing I wanted to ask you is you said, so I got into film composing, but there must be tons of people out there now are asking, how did you get into film composing? It's not easy to do.
Well, one of my best friends is Jeff Rona. Jeff Rona worked in Hans Zimmer's studio. I worked with Jeff too. I mean, you have to live in LA. You have to live in Los Angeles. I mean, yeah, you do.
Well, these
Vancouver's got a
days
lot of
not as much, but
maybe not as much these days, but
yeah.
by knocking around there, you meet people. I got a film through Jeff. I mean, there's just you just there. It is networking. There is networking, but I'll tell you, everybody else has figured out the only way to make money in music is with underscoring. Everybody else figured that out too, right? So you're right. You're right, Jim. The competition. Like I did a film. I was up for a film with a girl, and there were 30 composers up for that film. 30. So I had 29 other composers. We wrote 20 minutes of music. We used boy sopranos. We used real instruments on a lot of it. We worked our asses off, and we got the gig, right? And 2 weeks later, we got fired.
Oh my gosh.
That's how it is. That's how it is.
Yeah, yeah.
The
No,
reason
the
we got
horror
fired.
stories. If you
Yeah.
want horror stories, but I don't think we need to do horror stories
Well,
about.
let me just explain the last thing. The reason we got fired is the director decided the producer should do the music.
Oh gosh. Well, that's one
He
of the
didn't
worst ones
choose
I've
any of
heard.
the other 29 composers. He gave it to his producer, he didn't know how to write music very well. So there you go. It's pretty intense.
That reminds me of
and
a
my
funny story that
yeah.
reminds me of a funny story that Bruce Fowler told me where a very well-known big name producer told him he wanted the film to end with da ta ta ta. He goes, "You want me to end this with Beethoven's Fifth Symphony?"
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Come on,
no.
Randy,
Yeah.
give me the horror story. I want to hear the horror story.
Oh, and not, you want to hear another one?
He's got them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I got tons of them for the scoring
Yeah.
business, let alone just the record business. But Yeah. Well, I was wore about 5 hats for William Mulvis, and I was his right hand man, and I was his orchestrator, session producer, contractor. Paul and I were both copyists. When we orchestrated for him, we would also do the copy.
Yeah.
And then, gosh, I don't know, what was the 5th one? I'm sure it was just.
Well, just scheduling, Randy. We did the scheduling.
Well, that's the contracting.
Well, okay. There was also,
so anyway,
we were at the session. You were at the sessions helping out.
I was the producer on the sessions, and
there you go.
I had all the copy that you and I made, and I had all the orchestrations, and quite often, I mean, I know we were meticulous, but sometimes I had to correct a part during the session.
Yeah,
you were in there. And so you got to be, then you're the librarian, the session librarian, if you got all the copies and you're doing corrections. So, those were my 5 hats. And then, on some of the like the jazz score, we had a sitcom, or not a sitcom, but a cop show with a jazz score, James Earl Jones show. And I got to play guitar on it quite often, jazz guitar. That was awesome. But the horror stories would be like, we'd work our butts off on the score, and a director or producer would go, no, that's not going to do. Start over. That was a lot of times that happened. Or the ones where William would get the call from his agent, and the director would say, oh, we really hate the score that our guy came up with. We want Will to score it now, except for there's not very much time. They're going for a second composer with like no time left, So quite often we lost a lot of sleep. I mean, I'm sure happy I did it when in my 30s, because there'd be no way. No. I need my old man nap, man. Come on.
Well, it's funny. I used to, when I was doing some of the work myself, jingles and composing, I would get these like completely insane requests, and I used to just laugh. So one of them was, I said, "So what are you looking for?" And they go, "Well, we're looking for something that's retro-futuristic." And I would go, okay, so what is that? What's retro-futuristic? And the other one was, we want something that's sort of Michael Jackson, but country. You're just like,
oh my,
like the description of what they want was so ridiculous, So, and I remember too, when I used to master quite a few records, I had an Australian record label, and they would get me to master some stuff. And what I would do on the quotation forms is I would put down at the bottom, this is how much it is, and it's an extra 10% if you want to help. And they would sort of say, well, they would go, what's that? And I'd go, that's not for you guys. It's for everyone else that wants to come in the session and then have input. And so obviously it takes a lot longer, right? And so you're hiring me to do it. You guys are professionals. So it was all reverse psychology. It was completely for them, right? So then they would go, okay, and then sign it. And then they would be all frustrated that they couldn't get involved. It was genius.
That's pretty smart. We never thought of that. That's pretty good.
That's really smart. And that reminds me of that there was a couple of special knobs on the console that did nothing, so they could have their hands on thought they were doing something. The producer knobs or the director knobs.
I remember with William. Oh, sorry, Finbar. We don't hear you.
We lost your audio, Finbar.
You lost me? Okay, sorry. I was just saying that there was. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was saying in my studio I had some racks, and they were made by a company called Funk Logic, and one of them was called the Algorithmic Prosecutor, and it was a rack mount unit, and it had chicken head knobs on it, and one on one way it was funky, and the other one was aha, and then there was Thumb Pop and Good and the Brady's. So I'd be saying to people, "Oh, look, can you do you mind just winding up a bit of Thumb Popping Good?" And they would go over and they'd look at the knob and they'd twist it. Oh, yeah, that sounds better. That sounds much better. Genius.
And it didn't do anything, right?
Well, of course not. It's
It
psychology.
is zero, but you plugged it in. You actually plugged it in, and it was a blank panel, and the VU meter would just permanently go like this.
Yeah, yeah. It's a placebo control.
Exactly.
I remember something that, when you do scoring, you dream about doing a big film. Everyone does, and William got pretty big, So I remember
Yeah.
he got a huge film, and I was in on that, and I realized he told me, Paul, this is even worse. I said, why, William? He says, because now there's 5 people that say they want an alternate. 5 people, not 1, not 2. There's 3
Alternate
people at the
keys,
studio. They all want. Well, we want alternates. Blah blah blah.
Well, that's like Finbar was saying about having it in his contract. You can't have many cooks in the kitchen. Yeah.
Well, when you're with MGM or Warner Brothers
right.
or one of those that they're the cooks. You're
I
the
know,
chicken.
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it really scared the shit out of me because, pardon my French, because I realized this is not getting better. This is getting worse.
Yeah. Well, even Hans Zimmer will tell you, and I've seen him in interviews where he says, no, it's just absolutely, miserable existence the last month of it, or weeks of it, So yeah.
Well, look, guys. Look, this is a great conversation. We should pick it up another time because we're sort of getting to the end now, but just time wise. But look, this has just been a phenomenal conversation. I'm surrounded by 3 legends here. Very inspiring to me, and I'm sure it's going to be inspiring to everyone else. Where can we find out more about you guys? I'm sure everyone can go and look at the Kittyhawk website. Paul, what are you up to at the moment, buddy?
Well, right now, I've got some produced songs in the can. I've done 2 other solo albums after Kittyhawk and did a Christmas album all on the stick, this, that, and the other. But I am gonna come out with a new album because I have enough stuff to do a new album really easily. It's all finished. So probably the next thing I'll do is another solo album.
Great. Randy?
Yeah, well, I would like to do the same thing, but I am currently still recovering from medical issues. So, but I'll get there.
Cool. And Jim, I know I got one of your albums from Disassemble, which was amazing. What are you up to at the moment, mate?
Oh, you're the guy that bought it.
Yeah, I'm the guy. I'm the guy.
Nice. Well, today I'm a mess because I played Friday and Saturday night up the road at the R.T. Rogers Brewery, which is, I can't thank the people there enough. It's just a great crowd of people. It's nice to know when the gig is over. It's a 5-minute drive downhill to home, and Friday night was just Polly and I. We didn't have our main vocalist, so I had to sing a lot. And I finally am actually starting to get good at it. I really never considered myself a vocalist. And I'm actually starting to maybe feel like I might start to earn that title. And of course, when we do gigs, we play 3 hours straight. We don't take any breaks. If somebody needs to go to the bathroom, the other band members just keep playing.
Oh my God.
This is something that comes from my old Wade Preston days where you're afraid if you stop, everybody will get up and leave. But I also did just teach 4 hours at ETAP, Daniel Schell's European thing. I taught about Frank Zappa compositions, and I taught about the arpeggio thing that I had you look at, Finbar, before you started lessons with me. That's on my YouTube channel. And that's pretty much it. I'm still trying to sell Disassemble. I wish people would hear it. I work really long and hard on it. And I think a lot of people don't realize that there's very little six-string guitar on that because everything on it, I'm very proud of the sound of my Warr guitars on that. It just sounds great. There's lots of little MIDI tricks that nobody's even discovered yet. Like there was one thing where I tracked a solo with MIDI, and to do delay, I copied the MIDI track 5 times and would delay each track a little bit and then put a different synth sound for the delay so that as it delays, you get different sound. I love those kind of things. That's kind of the creativity thing I would add that you were asking about earlier, is having that capability. And now I'm engrossed with the VG8 I just bought. So I feel fortunate to have a lot going on, and I'm very grateful to Emmett for starting it. But for me, Mark freed me and allowed me to really become myself on the touch guitar. Cool. And that was the thing I would say about him, is I know for a fact that Mark listened to Paul, Mark listened to Randy, and he listened to me, and he listened to a lot of other players. And as a result, his instrument is a very good instrument because of that.
And he's a great instrument maker. So like that, those combinations are pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love my instruments. I love my tuning. I just feel like I finally have gotten to where I want to be after 42 years of playing tap guitar.
Well, guys, it's been so inspirational just hearing you guys. You guys are all inspirations to me. I'm sure they're inspirations to everyone. I think there's a really great message in all of this, which is this constant exploration, trying things, just going beyond, letting your imagination run wild. And at least for myself, getting into this instrument and having the legends of the instrument right before me across the world talking to me is very inspiring. So guys, I want to thank you for your time. It's been incredible, and we'll just keep tapping on. Hopefully one day I'm good enough to do something with you guys.
Oh,
I like
I've
what
seen
you
your videos. You're already there, buddy.
Doing. Yeah. You have a nice feeling to what you're doing, Finbar.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the attention.
My pleasure, guys. Anyway, thanks so much. I'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks for having us.
See you guys. Bye.